Kirsty. I've been super lucky to live in Kenya for the past 3 years. And in that time, I've tried to explore as much of the country as I could, which means I've had some incredible experiences and met some absolutely amazing people. And I wanted to share my adventures. So today, we're going to Mombasa. And I did something super fancy to get there, which was going in premium class on the Madaraka Express, which was the most brilliant journey. You leave Nairobi at 8 in the morning and travel through the whole countryside to all these different stations that you can see on the map. And you also pass through Tsavo East and Tsavo West National Parks, so you have the chance of seeing some big animals from the window. And then you reach Mombasa at 2 p.m. So it's just a 6-hour journey, and it's so nice. It's like being in what I imagine first class on an airplane would be like, with those fancy chairs. They bring you breakfast. Everybody is so nice to you. I think at home I would never ever splash out on traveling first class on a train, let alone premium class. So this was a wonderful experience. And one of the interesting things about this railway, I thought, apart from the beautiful views that you see, is that it replaced the original railway that was built between 1896 and 1901. That became known as the Lunatic Line. And this train that I was travelling on only started operating in 2017. So that original railway was in use for more than a century, first with steam trains and then later with diesel locomotives. And now this railway that I was travelling on was built with support from China. And sort of to complement this journey, I also went to the Railway Museum in Nairobi because I was very interested to know a bit more about how they had constructed that original railway line. And it was absolutely fascinating. I really, really recommend going to that museum, even if you're not a huge train fan. I mean, I'm not. But I love looking at old photos and I love hearing old stories. And in the museum, they have photos that must be more than 100 years old because they show the construction taking place way back in the late 1890s and early 1900s. Unfortunately, though, they don't allow you to share any of their photos. But I found some wonderful ones of the construction and some old steam trains online. And I also included some steam train photos that my dad took in Kitale in the 60s. And as you can see from the photo with the parasol, there was no machinery. Everything was done by hand, breaking through huge areas of rock to lay the railway tracks. It was an incredible feat of engineering, and it was built when both Kenya and India were colonized by Britain or ruled by the British regime. And the British brought thousands of Indian workers across to Kenya to construct this railway. So they are the ones who did most of the hard work. I saw photos in an album that the Bristol Archives have which show that there were Kenyans involved, but there really isn't a lot of information available as far as I could find. So please, if anybody's watching this who knows more about it from their own family, you can correct me or provide more information in the comments. That would be great. In what I was reading, it said that because in India they had constructed a railway for the British already, it was because of their technical expertise that they were brought across to Kenya to construct this new railway. And that's why they are the ones that did most of the work. But I was just totally in awe of what the construction workers achieved. In the museum, it says that 2,493 of the workers died in the process of creating that railway line, which is a very sad and sobering figure. But let's go back to my journey. Actually, before that, if you look closely at this photo, you might see a small child sleeping on top of the engine. And that's actually me when I was 2. I first came to Kenya when I was 6 months old, so this was my second visit, and we went to Mombasa on the sleeper train. But we don't have any photos from that journey, so I made this one out of an old photo my dad took in Kitale and one of a palm tree that I took in Diani. Okay, but now really back to the actual journey. It was super cool. As you got closer to Mombasa, you started to see baobab trees popping up everywhere. I just absolutely loved them. I'd never seen any in real life until I came to Kenya. I'd only seen them on TV or in books. And then the closer you got to the coast, the more you would see palm trees and everything being lusciously green. And then when you arrive in Mombasa, it's not chaotic at all. There are not that many people. It's nothing like the chaos of Nairobi. And I had arranged to be met by a taxi driver to take me to my hotel. And I got that number from one of my friends. And I was whisked away towards the beach. And I was staying in another incredibly fancy hotel. I seem to have turned into some kind of luxury traveler since I moved to Kenya. And that's not like me at all. When I was younger, I backpacked around South Africa for many months, and I never would have dreamed of staying in places like this. But this hotel was recommended to me by one of my friends. It's called Sarova White Sands, and I genuinely have no idea what it is like staying in a 5-star hotel at home. I've never ever done that because it's so expensive. I mean, my dream would be to stay in Claridge's, but even their cheapest room is around a month's rent for one night, so it will remain forever a dream to stay there. But staying in a 5-star hotel in Kenya, you just feel like an emperor or a pharaoh or somebody so important when you're just a tourist. Everybody is just so welcoming, they're so friendly. It's like living in another world. Anyway, the main thing I wanted to do in Mombasa was go exploring, not sit on the beach, although of course it's beautiful looking at all the palm trees and the ocean. But I wanted to do a walking tour, which is something that I like to do when I go on city breaks. And for this, I just used the website Get Your Guide, and I'd never used it before. And I was so lucky, I got a wonderful guide called Juma, who worked with a taxi driver called Boniface, who got us about the place. And they were a brilliant team. They were so friendly and chatty. Our first stop was Fort Jesus, which has had a very tumultuous history. It was built by the Portuguese back in 1593, and over the next few centuries there were multiple battles where they won and lost it, mainly to the Omanis, and then when Britain came along, they turned it into a prison, which seems like a very British thing to do. Anyway, now it is a museum, so you can spend hours wandering around inside looking at the beautiful architecture and learning about the history. I especially liked the turrets and domes, and I also really enjoyed looking at the Portuguese artwork. Because if you look closely, you can see the figures wearing pantaloons and brandishing swords whilst looking absolutely furious. And I was just thinking to myself, gosh, imagine having to wear something like that in the heat of Mombasa. Like the Victorian people sitting at the edge of the railway in Mombasa watching the launch of the railway line. And I was especially interested to learn about the cannons. The British ones, the Portuguese ones, and the Omani ones all looked different. And then we left Fort Jesus and just started making our way through the beautiful old town of Mombasa. There was a lot to look at. The architecture was interesting. People were just going about their daily business as we walked past, and it was just me and 2 other people. And one thing I think it is worth mentioning about Mombasa is that it's a huge port where thousands upon thousands of tons of cargo are brought in every single day, and these goods are then transported up along the railway towards Nairobi, and from there into the west of Kenya and to other countries across the continent. And they also travel along the highway, so it's an incredibly busy road, and you can see that from the train when you're on your way down to Mombasa. Then our next stop was the market, and it was a very vibrant place. You could buy anything and everything there, and I was especially interested in the spices. I bought some frankincense because I thought I needed it for a specific purpose, only to discover that in fact it was myrrh that I needed. And the next day, Juma very kindly arranged for somebody to hand deliver the myrrh to me, which I just thought was so kind. It's like he went above and beyond for his guests. So I definitely recommend going on that tour, and I'll put the link in the description below. Then from there we all hopped into a rickshaw or tuk-tuk, and we headed towards the iconic elephant tusks. These were built back in the 50s to welcome Queen Elizabeth, but now they've evolved into just a really cool place for photos. Then we crossed the road into Uhuru Garden, which seemed like a very peaceful park, but actually the main point of interest there was these bats, and there were thousands of them. And then our last port of call was the waterfront. So we moseyed on down there and saw this beautiful lighthouse, many more baobab trees with people sitting underneath them relaxing, and we also saw the Likoni ferry, which connects Mombasa Island with the mainland and runs 24/7, taking people back and forth all day. Mombasa is actually Kenya's second largest city, but I think it seems a lot smaller because I was just in the old town, so I'm sure there's a lot more you could see if you had more time to explore. Then that was the end of my tour, and I was taken back to my hotel for one last walk on the beautiful beach before I had to go back to Nairobi. I really enjoyed being in Mombasa, so I hope you enjoyed my video, and see you in the next one.